All right, I'm in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul has had a lot to say up until now. So there's a little bit of a change in tone from the Apostle Paul at the beginning of chapter 9, where he kind of responds to an anticipated rejection of what he has to say. He expects or he anticipates that there will be some resistance to what he has had to say. And so it's at this time that he gives a response to what I think he was expecting to see happen. You see, in sending this letter to the church in Corinth, to the people there, to talk with them about the dysfunction that's taking place, and to say, there needs to be some changes. In him doing that, then he should expect that there will be some kind of resistance to what he is going to share with the people there in Corinth. He should just expect that there are going to be some people who don't like what he has to say. I mean, if he has to tell these people that they need to remove the guy who's got his father's wife, as an example, if he's got to actually tell these people that, then he should expect that there's going to be some resistance of some kind to a lot that he has to say. And so this is his opportunity, or at least he takes this opportunity here in what we have as chapter 9 as the time when he's going to respond to what he expects that some people are going to be thinking. You see, in general, we have a tendency to evaluate others, to examine others just by default. You might think of me in that way. You might think, well, now, Aaron, I'm going to decide whether or not what you are saying is true. And okay, if you'd like to do that, that's just fine. But regardless of what you think about what I have to say, it's not really going to make too much of a difference from my perspective. I'm going to share with you what I sincerely believe. And if you don't agree with me, then that's your thing. This is my thing. You have your thing. But people have this opinion that what they believe concerning somebody else really does matter. Okay, as if it does, as if they are the ones who will decide and evaluate the quality of an individual, a quality of somebody else. And look, I understand that there can be a place for that in a certain way. To a certain degree, there can certainly be a place for that. But what Paul is going to address is the kind of evaluation that just isn't going to be fitting for what is going on here. That's what he's going to do, is to say, I understand that people may try to evaluate somebody else, but in this case, that just doesn't really have any significance or importance. Usually, we have this belief that we are correct. Okay? I, of course, will say that I have that bias. I really do have the bias that I'm correct. And what needs to be, recognized as part of that is that we have to always consider that maybe we're not. We just do. It's important to do that. It's important to be open to an alternative to what it is that we believe. Now, after a while, of course, after going through all of the different possibilities and options, we just kind of settle in on what it is that we have our beliefs in and what our convictions are. This is always a little bit of a disturbance on my end when people discover me for the first time in their lives. There will be some people who will discover me within the next few months. Within the next year or so, people will discover me, and they will evaluate what I have to say, what I believe, and then they will contact me, and they will say, now, Aaron, I do not agree with you. I believe that you are of the devil. Maybe, maybe not quite that far, but some people have related to me in that way. And they evaluate me and they judge me and they determine, according to their own beliefs and their own standards, just how well I conform to what they believe is true. And my usual response to that kind of evaluation, when they notify me of what they think, my usual response ends up being something that sounds like this. Now listen, I understand that I am new to you. I understand that just fine. But what you should consider is that this subject that you're talking with me about, or talking to me about, is not new to me. So while I might be new to you, do keep in mind that this issue is not new to me. Recently, there was a discussion over a certain topic and over a certain circumstance. And it's not going to be helpful for me to get into the details of that. But I will tell you that one of the persons involved who was creating conflict was a person who wasn't even born when I was wrestling with these issues related to this topic. And that was my response. In effect, it was, listen, I've been dealing with these issues and I have worked through these issues and I was wrestling with these issues that you're bringing up and you want to have an argument over before you were even born. Don't you think that I've given this some thought since then even? All right. And so what people tend to do is they tend to pass judgment on others. They tend to evaluate others without any consideration for others. It's just all about ourselves. It's all about themselves. And they just don't give this enough thought and enough consideration. So when Paul is writing to them and he's anticipating that there's going to be some rejection to what he has to say, this is who he's going to be talking to. He's going to be talking to people who pass judgment against him because he does not conform very well to what they already believe. Now, when someone does not conform to what somebody else already believes, then this person who is exercising this judgment, passing this judgment, doing this evaluation, will need to respond in some way to this person who doesn't agree with them, or that they don't agree with this other person. And so what they will do is they will usually look for something that they don't like about this person. And it's probably going to be completely unrelated to the topic at hand. But they're going to look for something, something wrong with this person who is saying things that we just don't like, we don't agree with. And some things will be found. They'll come up with some things as to, what is it that we can say against this person in order to then follow it up with, you see, and so this person is very unknowledgeable. They're not wise. They don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so they said this other weird thing, but they do not conform to what I already believe, and there is something wrong with them that I have found. So this person is nothing. They're nothing to me and to us, and they should be nothing to you. Because if they are, well, I'm going to find something wrong with you too. That's the kind of thing that goes on. Now, if they are evaluating somebody, and this somebody who they are evaluating conforms pretty well to what they believe, well, then a lot of these things that they wouldn't like, they'll just overlook. They'll say, oh yeah, okay, so there's some sexual immorality going on over with this person just as an example. But I'm going to overlook that because this other stuff that they're saying does conform to what I think is right. All right, now listen, there can be a place for such things like that. I don't want to look for them and I don't want to encourage them, and I understand that we have to recognize that nobody is perfect. I mean, if anybody would like to evaluate me personally and say, now, Aaron, I know that there's something wrong with you, my response will be simple. Yeah, well, you think you found something that's wrong with me? I'll tell you, there's a lot more than that. I can give you a bigger list than what you're giving me. So what's the point? Is what I am saying true about this, or is it not? If you want to look for sin in my life or dysfunction or whatever, don't worry. There's plenty to find. Okay? There's no shortage of that. People either use that against someone or they overlook it according to how well that person conforms to what this person already believes when it comes to some other issue. And so that's usually what goes on. So in the end, you either have a person who's willing to reconsider their beliefs or you don't. That's how it usually ends up. So while Paul is talking to the Corinthians, he is telling them what they ought to do concerning their current circumstances. They are either going to adopt what it is that Paul has to say, or they won't. And it won't matter what kind of excuses or evaluations or judgments that they pass. None of that really will have any relevance in the end. In the end, you ask the question, here is a problem. Is the problem being solved or is it not being solved? Paul presents a solution. Are they going to adopt the solution or are they not going to adopt a solution? So sometimes you will have to wait until they're done with all of their side stuff about how they don't like Paul, about this or about that. But once it's over, once all the dust settles from whatever kind of an explosion may erupt because of what Paul has to say, when all that's said and done, eventually, what is it that people are really going to do according to what they really believe? Will they change what they believe? Will they alter what they do? What will be the voluntary behavior that results from the convictions that people have or the convictions that get adjusted because they realize that they are in error when it comes to something and that they really want to conform closer to what it is that God thinks about these issues? That's what happens. But you usually have to give it some time to wait for that and see what happens. Okay, now here we have in chapter 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I'm going to go through verses 1 through 6. And what I've got here is I've got this divided up into really 3 parts. The first part is going to be in verse 1 and 2. And in this section, what I think is better emphasized is who is Paul? I think that's a good way of describing what we have here in verses 1 and 2, that Paul is communicating just who am I? Who am I really? And then in verses 3 through 5, you've got a little bit of a shift in what he's saying, which I think communicates, and who are you? And then in verse 6, we have a little bit of a paradigm shift away from both of those to introduce a different topic. And so I'll mention verse 6 a little bit, but in the next message, I'll spend some significant time in verse 6. So taking a look at verse 1, starting out in chapter 9, verse 1, am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? If I am not an apostle to others, yet doubtless I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. My defense to those who examine me is this. All right? So in verse 1 and 2, what I mentioned is that I'd like to emphasize the idea that Paul is saying, who really am I? Am I an apostle? I mean, is he an apostle or is he not? Is he not? Okay, this is anticipating that there are going to be people who are going to be examining him in some way in order to respond to what he has to say, probably because they don't agree with what he has to say. So who is he? Is he an apostle? Now, of course, we have to have a definition for an apostle. The traditional definition has to do with somebody who has seen Christ Jesus personally and is communicating the truth of the gospel. But usually people want to say he's a person who has in fact seen Jesus personally. And it comes from here, among other places, because that's what he says. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? A way of saying that this must be a way of defining what an apostle is. Okay, and I understand that this is the common way that people are defining what an apostle is or what an apostle is not. But I personally take a different point of view. I think that all this means is that Paul is someone who is representing somebody else, because that's the general definition of the word, even though people are trying to apply it in a biblical, scriptural concept and construct of some sort. The word was still used in the language already. It's not an invented word, some special word that was invented by the followers of Jesus at this time in order to define a special, unique person. The word was already being used, and it meant somebody who was sent out as a representative of somebody else. That's all it means. Paul was an apostle because he was sent by God as his representative, in this case, to share the truth of what Jesus did for people and what that implies in terms of the change in relationship that can now exist between God and humanity. So really, in that definition, anyone can be an apostle of the Lord. Anyone can be an apostle if we use that definition, even though they have not seen the Lord with their own physical eyes. All right, so I understand that there is a desire to have those special people in our lives who we look up to as being the authorities. And there can be a place for that. I don't want to say that there's no place for that. What I want to say is that through this desire, I think that people have misdefined the word, okay? And that they are using the word in a way that none of the apostles ever really intended. I don't think that really has any great significance, but it's here, and so I have to mention it, okay? It's here. I don't think it's really going to matter in the end. Remember, what really matters is what you believe concerning the truth of the Lord, not the truth of a definition of a word. But he's addressing them in this case by saying he is someone who is different from who they are. Who am I in comparison with who are you? Were you sent by God to do what I am doing? Paul was sent by God to do what he was doing. He was different from the people in Corinth in the sense that the people in Corinth were not sent by God in the same way, or if at all, as Paul was. And it's unlikely that they were sent by God, considering where they're at in their maturity in the faith and concerning the activity that they're involved in. It doesn't seem very likely. He goes on in verse 1, am I not free? All right, now he certainly is free from the law. Who is he? He is a person who is free from the law. He is a person who is not a slave of somebody else. And he is also a person who is free from them. They do not have a relationship such that these people have some kind of authority over his life. That's who he is. So as they might take the opportunity to examine him and pass judgment against him, they should keep that in mind, that he is free, that he's not a person who they can express consequences towards, regardless of what they think of him, how they might judge him or evaluate him. He is free of them. He's not bound to them in any way. That's who he is. And when people don't like what others are thinking or what they're doing or what they have to say, they can sometimes forget that that person is free of them, and that it doesn't really have that much significance at all what you think of somebody else if that person is free of you. And so he is reminding them, keep this in mind, folks, I am free of you. Have I, and then he goes on, have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? That's who he is. He is a person who has seen Jesus Christ their Lord. Have they? That is not who they are. That is who he is, but it is not who they are. Okay, now, of course, a lot of people had seen Jesus Christ. A lot of people. So just seeing him is not as significant as perhaps we would like it to be. There were a lot of people who saw Jesus. There were several people who were considered to be apostles of Jesus, his disciples. But what did they really do to contribute to the new covenant, to the perpetuation of the gospel? What did they do? We don't have any idea. That's how little, apparently, they were involved. And so just because a person has seen Jesus, let's consider that this person is one of those few people who like Jesus, okay, who believe Jesus. What about those who didn't? Obviously, they're not anybody significantly different than who they once were. And seeing Jesus did not benefit them or others. Those who did believe in him and those who did trust in him, did that really benefit them significantly? Did that really benefit others? Was there really much of a change through influence in the world? Not with everybody. So just because Paul has seen Jesus, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's got, a lot to work with. But in terms of this conversation that he is going to be having with the Corinthians, this is a way of saying, this is who I am, and this is who you are. And this could be something important to keep in mind, especially in consideration that Jesus sent him out to be his representative, to include sending Paul to these people in Corinth, that he was sent to these people, among many others, by the Jesus Christ who he saw. What do they have to say about that for themselves? So who are they to be evaluating him, to be passing judgment against him in comparison? Who do they really think they are? This is indirectly what he's beginning to express. Again, let me go to the beginning of verse 1. Am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Jesus Christ our Lord? Are you not my work in the Lord? Are you not? They are. Okay, they are his work. He is not their work. And it could be easy for them to get that backwards and to start to, assume in some way that Paul is kind of sort of their work, right? Why? Because they listened to what Paul had to say. I mean, that sounds backwards, doesn't it? It should sound, but that's what people start to think. They start to think, well, now, I listen to what you have to say, therefore you are my work. You remember that. That's who you are. You're my work. I'm listening. I'm evaluating. I'm judging. I'm deciding whether or not what you have to say is valid. So in that sense, you are my. This is what people start to think. That's how distorted people's reality can be. The Corinthians are the work of Paul. He was sent by Jesus to do a work in their lives, to be a participant in their change from who they once were to who they may become. So that's an important statement for him to make, to posture himself correctly in their lives, to say, in effect, who do you think you are evaluating me when I am the one who was sent by Jesus to do a work in your lives? You are the ones who are to be evaluated according to the effect and change of the truth within you. So in this at the end of verse 1, he is letting them know indirectly that it can be easy for them to get things backwards. Verse 2, if I am not an apostle to others, maybe he's not, right? Maybe he's not an apostle to the people of Colossia. What about the Ephesians, the Galatians? Maybe he's not an apostle to. Of course he is. Of course he was. All right? If they want to question those kinds of things, let them do that. But he does say, yet doubtless I am to you. So you may doubt that Paul is an apostle to many other people besides those in Corinth. Those people in Corinth, they might doubt that. After all, they're in Corinth. That's where their life is. Are they following Paul? Do they really know what his life is about? Do they really know what he's doing? They have no idea. They have no concept of the magnitude of what Paul has been doing, what he is doing, and what he's going to be doing. It's not unusual for me to have a meeting with somebody who has some degree of importance, and they have no concept of the magnitude of the work that I have done, or that I am doing, or that I will be doing. They just have no concept whatsoever. One of the first questions that I ask people when I have a meeting with someone who has some significance, importance, maybe I'm talking with them about engaging in a contract, for example, or they're asking my advice or opinion concerning getting on new radio stations or getting off radio stations, whether or not the directors of the ministry should agree to sign a new contract with a new station. When I'm talking with people, one of the things that I ask people is, have you seen the page on our website of recent testimonials? Have you seen that page? And in general, the answer is no. It's really unusual for me to talk to anybody and them be able to tell me that they really have seen that page and that they have read through a reasonable portion of the recent testimonials page. They just don't do that. They don't care. So if a person has any doubts about the effectiveness of the work that I have done, it's probably because they have not read that page, which is publicly available, which people can read, they can go through. And you can tell that it's not something that I just sort of created on my own. If you'll take the time to read through it, you'll know. It's completely obvious that it's just something that I just cut and pasted onto the page from what somebody else wrote. I had to make a few adjustments in order to maintain privacy and stuff, but that's it. And you can identify with what a lot of people have had to say. All right, but this has to do with doubt. Does anybody have any doubt about the effectiveness of the work that I've done? Does anybody have any doubt concerning who I am? Of course they do. Lots of doubt. Because they won't even take the time to read a simple website page just like that. They just won't do it. And so with the Corinthians and Paul, I mean, we probably have a pretty good understanding of who Paul is and what he's been, what he went through, and what he did. People in Corinth didn't know him like we know him now, even when they saw him personally. They did not really understand. They would have doubts. It's reasonable to understand that they would have doubts. But for them, that is doubtless that he is an apostle in their lives and that they are his work. This is something that they know better than to consider doubting at all. Verse 2, if I am not an apostle to others, yet doubtless I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. You are the seal of my apostleship. That's a way of saying that there is a certification of the apostleship. They are the certification of his apostleship. And they may doubt that he's involved in other people's lives. They may doubt that others would also be the seal of his apostleship. But there are many others. Okay, there really are. And I think that that's a good reason why people will not take the time to read the recent testimonials page that I have on the website, because they're afraid that if they do, they'll find out that I certainly do have quite a seal, quite a certification concerning my work and the effectiveness of what I have done, as the Lord has sent me to do it. And they just don't want to see that, because they want to assert themselves as being someone who gets to evaluate me, judge me, like that's really going to matter with anything. They're concerned about me being more effective than they would like, or more effective than somebody that they like more. In the end, really, this doesn't really matter too much, of course. This doesn't really matter, because the effectiveness of what I do will be the effectiveness of what I do, regardless of how well it's certified or whether anybody acknowledges it or recognizes it. That's not really going to matter. And I think that this is why Paul never really had to talk about this before. And that the only reason why he's even mentioning it now is through the anticipation that there's going to be some resistance to what he has to say. So he's just going to give his response to the anticipated resistance that's going to come, because he knows with confidence that there will be plenty of people who won't like what he has to say. And so this is going to be his response. He won't even have to wait for them to give him their criticism. He won't have to wait for that. He could say, well, didn't I already respond to this criticism that you have of me? He has. He's already responded, so don't even bother sharing it with him. Okay, so verse 2. Verse 2, again. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 2. If I am not an apostle to others, and of course he is, yet doubtless I am to you, for you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. They have experienced enough of a changed life in terms of who they once were to who they are now because of the work that he did in their lives. This is who he is. This is a way of Paul saying, this is who I am. All right. So now who are you? Verse 3. My defense to those who examine me is this. What defense? What does he need a defense for? Who is right? This is what's going to be happening, and he's preempting the examination coming from others that he expects. He'll give his defense right here, so they have it for when they're ready to go against him in some way. But in saying that there are those who will examine him, he is also introducing the question, and so who are you who want to examine me? Those of you who examine me. Well, who are they? Right? Who are you? Verse 4. Do we have no right to eat and drink? Now, where am I getting the who are you from this one, right? Do we have no right to eat and drink? Well, this is it. Are the people in Corinth the ones who give Paul the permission to eat or drink? Who are you? Are you the person who gives permission for Paul to eat or drink? You know, whether he can eat something, whether he can drink something, or even if it's alcoholic. Are these people the ones who give him permission? Who are you? Who do you really think you are? All right? Do I have anybody like that in my life who gives me permission to eat or drink? You know, I have had a few who have tried to assert themselves in my life in that way, kind of, sort of, and it didn't work out. No, I don't. I don't have anybody. But that's what he begins to convey. You know, who are you really? Don't I have the right to do this without your permission? This right is not given by you, that you can maybe withhold it or change it and say, oh, now, Paul, you no longer have the right to eat and drink. That's not how that goes, right? Verse 5, do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do also the other apostles, the brothers, or the Lord and Cephas? That's a way of asking them, are you the ones who give us permission to get married? Now, in the previous chapters, he spoke about this, about the subject of food being offered to idols, being married, not being married, having a wife, not having a wife. And he presents to them some ways of responding to the situation and the crisis that they were dealing with at that time. That's what he says to these people. Are they going to evaluate him, judge him, and come and tell him that he has permission to eat or drink what food offered to idols or not offered to idols? Is that how they are going to relate to him, or tell him whether or not he can be married, if he has to stay single, or if he can get married or not, regardless of whatever? Are they the ones who really get to decide that? Who are they? He has made it clear to them who he is. That's verse 1 and 2 as I've expressed it. Who am I? And then who are you? And to really put them in their place, and for them to recognize and realize that they are not the ones who pass judgment on Paul. Now, why would they do that? Because they don't like what he has to say. If they don't like what he has to say, then that's what people do. They then look for something that they can criticize. And it could be something like, well, now, we think that Paul might have eaten something that somebody gave thanks to some false god for. He might have eaten some food that was offered to some false god by the person who offered it to them, offered it to him. They might bring that up and say, you see, he's no good. Maybe he ate something in violation of the dietary laws. He might have eaten a bacon double cheeseburger. Yeah, he might. And then what are they going to say? Now, if somebody wanted, I don't eat bacon double cheeseburgers myself, but if I did, and someone wanted to complain and say, now, Aaron, we think that you're not of God because you ate a bacon double cheeseburger, then I would just simply point out, well, according to the law, it does say that I am unclean until evening. And I suspect that I ate this bacon double cheeseburger before yesterday evening or before the last evening, and so you're just too late. You want to pass judgment on me? You should have done it yesterday or the day before, or whatever day it was, because it's over now. I am now clean and righteous before God because I was only unclean until evening of that day that I ate of that bacon double cheeseburger. I mean, this is what people start getting into. Okay, and people may look at me and say, now, Aaron, we need you to have a wife. Yes. Or if I had a wife, Aaron, maybe you shouldn't have a wife. Maybe there's something seriously wrong with you because you have a wife now when you didn't before, or you did before and now you don't. What does that matter when it comes to what is true, what is not true? Who is the Lord? What does he think? What is he doing? Okay, people point those things out. They bring those kinds of things up. They look for those kinds of things when they want an excuse to reject the truth that is being conveyed. That's usually how that goes. So going back to verse 4, do we have no right to eat and drink? They would try to use that as a way of saying, well, let's examine Paul. Let's evaluate him. Let's judge him because if we can find something wrong with him, then we can reject what he has to say concerning these things that we just don't want to agree with. Do we have no right to, this is verse 5, do we have no right to take along a believing wife, as do also the other apostles, the brothers of the Lord, and Cephas? Verse 6, or is it only Barnabas and I who have no right to refrain from working? Well, who gives him permission to stop working or to work endlessly? When he uses that word, do we have no right? Is it only Barnabas and I? We have no right to continue to stop working, because they could use that. They could say, well, now, we don't think Paul and Barnabas are doing as much ministry as they ought to. We heard that they took some time off to go do something that was not biblical. Biblical in the sense that it wasn't related to sharing the Bible with other people. They went off and did something that wasn't ministry. How dare they? There is something wrong with them. Let's disregard everything that they have had to say to us concerning how we are to respond to this present crisis, whatever it may be. This is what people do. This is what immature people do, but this is what people do. And so Paul is presenting his response to this kind of expected dysfunction from these kinds of people, so that they have it when they go through this letter and discover things that they just don't want to respond to in the way that Paul is asking them to respond. All right, so I'm going to pause here, and then I will spend more time in verse 6 in the next message concerning this idea of working endlessly, because it is an important topic, and it's something that really does need to be expressed, because this is an issue, especially when it comes to the ministry, that there's this expectation that people are supposed to do a lot more than even what they probably are physically capable of doing. Huge expectations of those who are actively involved in the ministry with regards to many different things. And so I'll spend some time in the next message talking about that. For those of you who are using this for your small groups, I got a question that might facilitate some interesting conversation. Who are you? Right? And in addition to that, consider, who will you become? All right. Now, listen, if you've got no answer to either one of those questions, this is a chance to think about it and say, you're right. This is something that should be thought of. Who am I and who will I be? Otherwise, you just might be one of those people who's just kind of waiting for death. And that's not probably a good way to be living the rest of the years of your life. And so, who are you and who will you be? Just something to consider and have a discussion about, just to kind of get things going. And I'll continue in the next message. Thanks.